Church Without Walls on Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. We're a little bit distracted this morning, but we're going to talk to you about Jesus, of course, Mother's Day, electric light bulbs, electric cars, and change. This and more. Next. So I'm distracted this morning. I'm just going to tell you why. I get kind of, what would you call it? Obsessed when I'm looking into new things. I've got kind of this obsessive element to my personality, and I jump into it and I focus. And right now, because my wife's trusty steed has given up the ghost, we are looking into transitioning into what's called an EV, right? So we're looking to go electric on our next vehicle. And so there's a lot to learn because I know nothing. And years ago, it would be funny to talk to myself, 3, 4, 5 years ago, because I thought electric cars were for weenies. And I thought they were just slow. And, well, if you saw the original Nissan Leaf, I mean, they even joke about it. It's like Wendy and I heard a guy say today that the original Leaf was a car to convince you to hate electric cars. And until Tesla came out with one, people did. But the idea of an electric car, to me, wasn't very appealing years ago as somebody who loved the muscle cars of the 60s and the 40 and the 34 Ford. The idea of an electric car, to me, I lived in a world, but in the world I lived in at the time, I thought it was a scam. I thought it was Gaia worship. And now, many years later, I've evolved and grown, and I think they're fascinating and promising and could be very wonderful additions to civilization. So I've been obsessed with looking into, chargers and what kind of car we can afford and lease or buy, all these kinds of things running through my head over the last few hours. And then Peyton said, "Daddy, we have a show in a few minutes. And so how am I going to transition this into talk about Jesus?" And we're going to talk about change. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when I was growing up, this is a true story, because of the environment I lived in, even when leaded fuel began to be banned, right? When we went to unleaded fuel in the environment I grew up in, that was like also a weenie move, if I can use that term twice on a Sunday. And it was considered, government overreach and not really helpful, and just an anti-American, kind of a global one world government move. And there was really, even at that time, and I was a little kid, but I remember the environment, and it was, this idea, we're going to unleaded fuel. How outrageous. I had that same feeling when the attack on the light bulb came about. And this is something you all remember because it was just a few years back. And there was some truth to the kickback against the lights, because the one that Al Gore came up with was not much of an improvement, right? That spiral thing with like cancer inside of it. And so if you broke it, you needed a hazmat suit to clean it up. That was not an improvement. But like much progress, you take a step forward and 2 steps back, and then all of a sudden a bound comes forward. And the bound forward in light bulb technology was the LED light, which no one looks at now and balks at, because it is infinitely better than either the spiral Al Gore version or the previous typical version. And there were incentives to phase out the older light bulbs that people had stored up from the Commonwealth Edison or whatever. But now it just, people don't feel forced to buy an LED bulb because it's just that much better. And I think that kind of attitude is happening with electric cars too, with vehicles and so forth. But so what does this have to do with Mother's Day and Christianity? I'm going to weave that together in a second, but let me start with what it has to do with Christianity. I think many people have a faith and a religion that remains stagnant or dormant their whole life. And I don't really think they understand that everything that is profitable in the world evolves. Not just nature, what we see in nature, but what we see in technology, what we see in different areas of knowledge. The evolution takes place all around us, except in this corner that we've kind of fenced off, that we call Christianity or faith or, our heritage, that kind of thing. We kind of, have sentries set up to stop change from happening. And I just want to bring this up to you because people do that in Jesus' name. And I think it's ridiculous when you think about the way Jesus worked and his whole life and testimony. Now, there's a lot of Protestants who are duplicitous in this way, and they are contradictory because they don't mind reveling in their heroes, be it Calvin or Luther or Zwingli or what have you, or just anyone who's not Catholic, because they actually think the Catholic Church was so dark and so anti-Christ, and thank God for the Reformation. But they're stuck in the Reformation. They're stuck 500 years ago, and they don't believe, like the Reformers believed. The Reformers said that the church must be constantly reforming itself, which, by the way, is, a definition of evolution. This kind of process that we question motives, that we question doctrines, that we make room for growth, and because truth doesn't fear scrutiny, and because that's how progress is made by, this generation's hero was last generation's heretic, and the challenge of orthodoxy is how change is made, whether it be in the computer technology world, automobile world, light bulb world, or faith. Why do I say this? If you look at Jesus, he didn't change the world within the church. He changed the world in spite of the church. And oftentimes the church not only came kicking and screaming, but came with stones in its hands, wanting to kill him. When you look at the story of Jesus, and I hesitate to say this, but I don't think Christians really know Christ very well. They know their Sunday school, they know their denomination, they know what they've grown up with because of grandpa and because of their youth pastor, or maybe some kind of creed or confession that was forced upon them at a young age in CCD or in Sunday school or Awana. But they never really have stepped aside from all that baggage and considered Christ and his words and the stories that revolve around him. Because if they've done so, they'd realize he's a revolutionary character, and he was anything but an Orthodox Jew in his day. As a matter of fact, the people who were the most Orthodox in his day wanted to kill him at every turn. And there's not a lot of stories about Jesus in the church. He reads in the synagogue from Isaiah, and the reaction to that, wasn't glorious. He wasn't real popular in the temple either. When he was in the temple, it would usually cause a riot. Can you imagine if Billy Graham walked into a church and it caused a riot? But that's the kind of person, and that was the kind of message that Christ brought. Now, how many times did Jesus say, "You've heard it said"? and he'd quote the Torah, which is like the holy scriptures of Judaism. And then Jesus would change it. But I say, and he would add to it, which is condemned within the scriptures. And he would sometimes contradict it and sometimes undermine it. And this is the reason, by the way, they thought he was anti-Moses and they wanted to kill him. But no Christians today look at Jesus as a heretic or as an unorthodox rabble-rouser, as a rebel or as a revolutionary. And that's because Jesus, the Lion of Judah, has been declawed and domesticated by modern religion, by modern Christianity. And we don't see him in the beauty and the really awful splendor of who he was and what he accomplished, not through the church, not with the church, in spite of the church, in the face of the church that would eventually have him crucified. So I think that's something we need to take into account, that we, in every area of life, we grow and we process new information, and there's a wrestling with old ideas and new ideas, and really revolutionary minds come to the forefront. People like Steve Jobs, who is a reflection of Da Vinci before him. People like Elon Musk, who in humility named his company Tesla in a hat tip to another revolutionary of his time. And so these people are rare in their different fields. They're rare, and yet they drag the past into the future by thinking differently about the present. And so I'm thinking here about electric cars and how I used to feel about them. When I was a culture warrior pastor who was operating under fear and loathing, the fear of the outside world and the loathing of it, and this idea of fortification Christianity and this idea of making the gospel more Christian nationalism than actually what Jesus said and did and asked us to do. And so here we are on Mother's Day, and I'm thinking of saying something that's probably going to insult you all. But I've said it in front of my dear loved ones before, and they kind of shook their head when they gave me a chance to hear it out. They didn't wave me off, or they didn't feel insulted themselves, and that is the idea of what is a Christian. Now, if you Google that, or if you're in certain circles and people argue about what is a Christian, you'll see Protestants saying Catholics aren't really true Christians, and Mormons aren't, and even Seventh-day Adventists, they're not real Christians. You have to be a Christian like us or our stripe or our variety. And it becomes very ugly very quickly, because there's even some hardcore pre-Vatican II Catholics who don't consider anyone outside of the Catholic Church a legitimate Christian and all that. And it gets, if you're within the church, it gets ugly and blurry about what it is. But if you're outside of the church and you realize that calling yourself a Christian is kind of like somebody who calls himself a Marxist, a follower of Marx, right? We know what a Marxist is, right? And we know that a good Marxist would not be pro-capitalism, would not be pro-property rights, right? That wouldn't be a good Marxist. And yet we see a lot of Christians that don't resemble Christ at all. I heard a theologian recently say on a podcast that the Christian church in modern times is a closer follower of Nietzsche than it is Jesus Christ. And I'll let that marinate for a second and tear that one apart and put it back together and see if it doesn't have some miles on it. At first it was a striking comment, and then the more I thought about it and the more I saw the insurrection in Washington, D.C. with Jesus flags, the more I started to think about how fortified Christianity is so against certain things that the rest of the world actually sees as quite common sense, like taking care of the environment and like actually believing the expertise of scientists who spent their lives studying a certain subject. Actually believing the age of the earth isn't 6,000 years old and that T-Rex bunked on the ark with Noah. Yeah, there are certain Christian circles that revel in the absurd. So why is it different for people outside the faith to look at something and say, well, yeah, that guy does follow Karl Marx. He's a true Marxist and he's proud of it. But how many Christians have you met in your life? Now, I'm not talking about somebody who confesses Christianity or even professes Christianity. I'm not talking about somebody who checks a box on a form, like Caucasian or African American, like Christian, for what religion they follow. I'm talking about a reflection of Jesus Christ. I'm talking about have you met a disciple of Jesus Christ? Somebody who follows his words? And not just, once in a blue moon, but lives by the words of Christ and dies by the words of Christ. I mean, how many people in your life have you met that way? And now, in my own personal accounting, I've met one. However, virtually everyone I know claims to be a Christian. Now, I'm not saying to you all, I don't believe you're a Christian, because you have a formula for that. You have, well, I said a prayer when I was 7. You have, well, I've gone to church all my life, and yes, I'm a Christian. Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and I follow him, and yeah, I'm not disputing that. That's great. That's just not my definition of a Christ follower. And I'm saying, how many times have I actually seen Jesus? Somebody who under pressure acts with love and forgiveness. Somebody who under pressure turns the other cheek. Somebody who under oppression actually embraces the oppressor twofold. I've seen a lot of Nietzsche. I've seen a lot of Nietzsche in Christ's clothing. I've seen temporary Jesus, where just in a fleeting moment you see him, and then you look again and he's gone. Now, by the way, if you're insulted, I kind of knew that was coming. This show is mostly to get you thinking. So I want you to think about your own life and your own experiences with people. And how many times have you seen a true Jesus reflected in the whole life of somebody, not just fleeting moments? And to me, that's rare. And I've seen it fleeting in certain places. And granted, how well do we really know anyone? So I'm not judging the thousands upon thousands of people I've met. There's a certain necessity for intimacy for you to kind of view a person in their element. And by the way, you should know this up front. Ooh, is Peyton? Oh, Peyton cam's off already. I got to really order a new cord for that. I include myself in this assessment. I actually include myself in this assessment. I am much closer to Nietzsche than I am to Jesus. And it's horrifying. Now, I don't want to be Nietzsche. I want to be a devoted Christ follower. I want to be a greater reflection of Jesus in my acquaintances, and my relationships, and my worst moments. I'm just not. And I'm honest enough to tell you, I'm not. I want to be. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I've seen it in one person who I was around a lot, more than just fleeting moments, but like consistently, but like daily, under immense pressure at certain times in her life. And it's going to sound cliche, but I've really only met one Christian in my life, and her name was Mary Kirkwood. I've seen Mary in her worst moments. So happy Mother's Day to all you out there. I'm not saying you're all lesser people than my mother. I'm just saying, if I'm being honest with you, the closest reflection to the Christ that I've seen was my mother. And I think nature kind of leans that way for us. I think that's our first conception of God. is our relationship to our mother, and seeing her sacrifice, and seeing how devoted she was, even in the face of ingratitude and indifference. How persistent she was to love the unlovable. Many of those were occasions where it was literally her own children that kind of fit that. I'm going to show you a picture here in a second, but I want to go deeper into the insult that I just thrust upon you. And I didn't mean it to be so insulting because, you know, I've said this in front of my wife, and she understands now that when I don't even consider myself a Christian in that manner, she gets it, and I think she's not insulted, because she usually tells me when she is. But I've said this in front of other people who think, well, wait a minute, you know, are you dismissing all these other people in your life that we think are pictures of that and so forth? And no, I'm just saying the greatest consistency, if I had to point to one person, if I was putting together a time capsule for further generations to understand, or if I was introducing an alien race to this concept, an alien race or an alien tribe that was just discovered, to this concept of what it means to be a Christ follower, I would talk to them about my mother and those opportunities that presented itself to share Mary. Here's my mom, and my favorite quote of my mother's is something she drove home in us, and I've never lived up to, and I've frequently stumbled and then come back to and said Mom was right, is the only key to open closed doors is love. Mary Kirkwood. That's my mom who's looking into the camera. Her mom was an old school Assyrian who kind of believed, like the Native Americans, that to indulge a camera was to lose your soul. It's a soul-sucking device, so don't look it in the eye and be angry at those who are doing it to you. So her son was taking this picture of his sister and his mom, and she's looking at my mother, who's beaming with a smile. And I just love the look her mom's giving her. I just love this look. It's a generational thing, if you haven't experienced this. But it is a generational thing. Like, look how tight-fisted she is. She's holding her hands together in front of her. Her shoulders look all tense. Doesn't Grandma? This is your great-grandma. You never met her. But look at the tense nature of great-grandma, the Assyrian queen, looking at her Americanized, indulgent daughter. But this quote, the only key to open closed doors is love. Now, I've said that Mary might be the only Christian I've ever met. I've met others that in fleeting moments have shown me Christ, and I'm so grateful for seeing that and experiencing that. My father walked into a jailhouse to visit me one day, and it was the prodigal's father falling on my neck, and I saw Christ. And so I saw Christ in my father at a jailhouse. I see Christ in a man I have not personally met yet, but a black musician named Daryl Davis. And I say black, and I identify him as black because I'm going to tell you something that has to do with his race and his color, and that is he's got this strange hobby of going to Ku Klux Klan meetings and using love to open doors that are shut and bolted and nailed. Daryl Davis has led 200 people out of hatred, not out of the Klan, out of abject ignorance and hatred. A black man has led white racists out of a deep, dark, soulless existence into the light. And he's done it not with arguments, not with scolding, not with guilt, not with shame, but with the persistence of undeserved love. Love in awkward places is transformative. You know, Jesus at one point said, you know, you love your own. Like he's talking to a group of people who weren't really expressing love to anyone outside of their family or outside of their particular tribe, Pharisees. And Jesus says, you love your own. So what? The wicked love their own too. You know, Al Capone loves his own. Hitler loved his own. The wicked love their own. You know, except for a very small minority of people who have mental disorders, this is a natural thing to love your own. It's kind of a natural thing. And if you don't find it, there's usually some wires that have been crossed or never connected mentally for that not to happen. But Jesus says that's the lowest common denominator, that you love your mom, or that you love your brothers and sisters, or that you love your own family, or that you love fellow Southern Baptists who vote just like you and think just like you, or that you love your particular whatever ideological tribe. The wicked do that. Now, Jesus isn't saying this as a compliment to the wicked. He's saying that's nothing. You know, to be a follower of me, you need to love beyond the natural. The love I'm talking about is supernatural. It's above that. It's beyond that. And it takes more than natural inclination, the indulgence of instinct. It's premeditated, and it anticipates jamming, hostile jamming, and frustration, and ingratitude, and unrequited emotions. And in my experience, the few times that I've been able to love in this way, you know, outside of my own to somebody who doesn't deserve it, it's because I had premeditated. I had thought about it before, and I had thought about my relationship to God and so forth, and what it meant for me to love this irascible, unattractive, even despicable person. Now, not everyone is that in every moment, so it might have been simply in a season of their life where they were this ugly, or it might just simply be because I couldn't appreciate them in total of their whole personality, because I have my own personal inquiries that conflict with other individuals, and so it might have been my own drawbacks that didn't see them as I should. But that's the key, to see them as Jesus saw his persecutors and prayed for them. When he washes the feet of his betrayers, when he cries over Jerusalem as a mother hen whose chicks don't return to it when the storm clouds gather. So, now that I've insulted the whole crowd, I wasn't planning on... Are you almost done?
Almost.
Because we want to get on with our Mother's Day. We've got a lot of cool things planned. Oh, shh. Shh. I wasn't supposed to say that. Mom's listening.
Oh, yeah.
Shh. Did I talk about everything I promised you? Tesla, light bulbs, mothers. Change. Jesus instituted change not by being a good little Jewish boy. He was anything but a good little Jewish boy. He was not that. As Luther was not a good little Catholic boy. And I'm not even a fan of Luther, by the way. I'm just a fan of progress. And I think we need to break out of the mold that I had built around electric cars and modern light bulbs. These fences that we have put up that are not only unnecessary, but they're prohibitive to growth and change, and actually the advancement of wisdom. These prejudgments that we all have acquired, like a little child who's collecting baseball cards, and that they're precious to us, and we just can't lay down our racism or our sexism. You know, one of the things about growth is I used to pick on Saddleback Church and Rick Warren, and they did something brilliant this past week, and they ordained 3 women pastors. And it's about time. I think it's the 21st century, and Christians are finally getting back to where Jesus was in the first century when it came to women. And James McGrath has written a brilliant book called What Jesus Learned from Women. A brilliant book. And it's about time that we allowed our women outside of the coffee ministry and the nursery. Before I left my church, one of the things I was proud of, I tried to do this. And it's funny, even some of the women I approached dug in their heels because they were so conditioned to believe that a woman shouldn't speak in church. So one of the last times I had lined up a woman to speak, she refused to speak unless her husband was with her on stage. And I said, all right, well, I think you have something worth sharing with the church. So if you feel that way, I'm not going to fight this battle. I got a few months left here. So, okay, go ahead. But it's just stunning how backward we can be when we collect these little aspects of our heritage that don't belong, that Jesus challenged, and that Jesus, were he here today, would challenge. Because that's how growth happens. So I salute Professor McGrath for writing What Jesus Learned from Women, and I salute Saddleback Church for actually snubbing the SBC, who's trying to live in a backwards world where women were second-class citizens. I mean, think about what Jesus and Paul taught. And Paul says, in the body of Christ, there's no male or female. And we're just starting today to appreciate that, to actually apply that. He says this on 3 occasions. The ministry of Jesus was surrounded by faithful women and men who looked like the Keystone Cops. And he lived in a very sexist, backward generation. If he lived today, he wouldn't be telling a woman to be quiet in church and know her place. As a matter of fact, it was the Christian church, the early church, who broke down the middle wall partition between the women and the children sitting on that side of the synagogue and the men on this side. The men and the boys over 13 years old, 12 years old, sitting on this side. That stopped in the Christian era because we were sitting together as families in living rooms. We didn't separate. Oh, you have to go sit by the sofa and with mom, and we're going to sit over by the diner. It's ridiculous. And it's one of those things that the progress of Christianity tore down. We don't feel that growing pain now. We weren't there to experience it. We weren't there to experience the growing pain out of circumcision or out of Jewish dietary laws. We weren't there. But believe me, there was a fight there. And the Apostle Paul led it. And Jesus led it. So my challenge to you today, now that I've insulted you and said you're not a true Christian, believe me, if you understand that in the context, you'll get it. My challenge to you today is to think more about Jesus and less about the Southern Baptist Convention or what you learned in CCD or what I don't know who's a godfather in the evangelical movement now, what Franklin Graham says, or what John MacArthur has written. All that is rubbish and baggage. Clear it all out. Study the person of Jesus Christ and reflect on the change he made at the time and the things he said that were so revolutionary. Look at how Christ has changed over the centuries and how we've taken a William Wallace-like revolutionary and dociled him down to a Stuart Smalley-like pastel-wearing domesticated house cat. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Except, Peyton, are you ready?
I just need to add finishing touches.
She's got finishing touches. Some people, particularly certain women who are childless, or certain men and women who've never known the love of a mother, have a hard time with Mother's Day. And I always try and suggest, and I know the pain is real, and we hear you and we see you, but I always try and suggest, even if you never knew what it was like to have a glorious mom, to have a loving mom, and even if you never had the opportunity yourself to be a mother yourself due to varying circumstances, please understand there is such a thing in this world as good mothers, as great mothers, and understand it in the institution. Whether, and if you need literature to do that, or if you need a movie to do that, to get you to recognize that we can all learn something from not only good mothers, but bad mothers. So don't allow that to ruin Mother's Day for you because you had a troll as a mother, or a mommy dearest, or maybe your mother left you when you were a child, or abandoned you, or maybe you were adopted and your birth mother wasn't there, and you have all these hang-ups about it. Don't hide on Mother's Day, and don't resent the fact that there are other people out there who do appreciate Mother's Day and are enjoying it. It kind of is like this syndrome, like if you've ever been young and you've gone through a heartbreak because your girlfriend broke up with you or your boyfriend broke up with you, and like over the next week or two, you're out in public and you don't want to be because you just want to curl into a fetal position and, gin and juice and order pizza, but in pajamas. Okay, it's getting worse. But if you've ever been in that position, the last thing you want to do is go out in public and see people in love, and see two lovers holding hands at a Starbucks table, or see people laughing together or kissing, and that's the last thing you want to see because you're tormented over it. And yet deep down you know that you're not really jealous of them, and you don't wish them ill. You don't want to see them, although at the moment you wouldn't mind if they were abducted by aliens or hit by a semi-truck, but you don't really want to see harm come to them, and you don't really want love not to be true. because you believe in the truth of love is why you feel so bad that you've been rejected, or you've been abandoned, or you've been betrayed. And so it's part of your belief in the truth of love that makes you feel cringy when you see love on display. So try and take that lesson from it. Try and realize that you might feel horrible on Mother's Day because you didn't get to experience the love of a mother, or even the capacity to be a mom. And yet, even the God of the Old Testament said to Israel, as one whom a mother loves and cherishes, so I have loved you. And so we understand that the ideal nature of a mother's love that really truly is godlike. It really truly is like what agape seems to suggest, that a mother could even love the unlovable. One of the stories my mom used to tell me, and it's Assyrian, my Italian friend. I'm Italian too. I'm Assyrian and Italian and Scottish. And so the Italians try and steal the story, and I think they could try and make it about Nero. But my mother used to tell me an old Assyrian story that's been appropriated by the Greeks and the Italians and the Turks. Everyone steals from the Assyrians. But she used to tell me this story, and it was just horrific if you think about it. But it actually happened in the life of Emperor Nero in a way. She'd tell me the story of this young man who didn't really have it all together, and he was a prince, and he fell in love with this beautiful girl, and this girl was jealous of his relationship to his mom, and the girl said, you know, I'm not going to get involved with the man who's still, you know, tied to his mother's apron strings. And he was so desperate to win this woman, to win her love, that he said, I'll do anything, and the girl said to him, kill your mother. You know, cut out her heart and throw it into the, you know, to the Euphrates or the Tigris River. And so the story goes that he killed his mom and he cut her heart out. I know, a little bit bloody for Sunday morning, but he's running to the banks of the river. And as he's running to the banks of the river, he trips on a stone and he bounds forward and he falls. And the heart bounds forward out of his hand. And as he's picking himself up, scraped and bruised, he raises up his head and he hears a familiar voice coming from the heart. And it says, "Did you hurt yourself, son?" And this ancient, gory, horrific story is meant to teach indifferent, ignorant sons about how their mother really loves them, that even in their worst moment, even then when their heart has been cut from them and it's about to be thrown into a river, the mom cares more about his scraped knee. And this is true of a beautiful and a loving mother. I mean, I know it's hyperbole, but those of you who've had that experience know it. And so let's celebrate that, even if it's in literature. Now, my favorite Mother's Day movie is another thing to insult you, because some people think it's just a horror movie, but the movie A Quiet Place not only has a great type of Christ in the Father, and I won't give you a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but there's a wonderful type of Christ in a moment of the movie in the person of the Father. But it's really the best movie you could watch on Mother's Day. It's really a Mother's Day movie. It's a celebration of true motherhood in this movie, A Quiet Place, made by the husband and wife team, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. And it's not a horror movie, don't believe it. It's the background is kind of a alien invasion. It might seem that way, but it's just like Cinderella Man wasn't a boxing movie. It was a movie about family and love. This isn't an alien invasion movie. It's just a movie about family and love. So go watch A Quiet Place. And okay, it's time, Pay. Can I show the people? So it looks to me like you made a Mother's Day card.
Yeah.
And let me try and oh, I gotta hold it in front of the camera. Let me try and figure this one out. So it says, "We think you are the best mom."
No,
and
the.
what?
Just, no, the. Just best.
You are best mom. Okay, no the. We don't have room for the. We think you are best mom. Can I say it in my caveman voice? We think you are best mom. I love that. I love that. It's kind of old world. And then on here, I see Connor, because he's got the beard. I see Carter, because he's got the frizzy hair when he wakes up, and he's got the curly hair. And I see Peyton. Well, who's this nutter over here on the side?
That's Mom.
What?
That's Mom.
Mom? That's Mom? I guess if you look closer, it's a blue dress, but I thought it was all a beard. I thought it was like a caveman. So there's a blue dress under the brown hair, and so it doesn't look like a caveman, which is what it looks like here, a caveman looking in on the side. So Mom is looking in on her children, the pride of her life, and then there's Bella and Cassie and Caspian down here.
And if you push up this, it's a rainbow.
And it's a rainbow. And it's beautiful, Pay.
Except
And a
for
heart.
colors.
And a heart. And a heart. So it's kind of like a 3D card.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good angle. Folks, happy Mother's Day. We love you. I hope I haven't insulted you. I hope I've gotten you to think about certain things. The only key to open closed doors is love. And it's true. Thank you, Mary.